She was 9 years old. It was 2:30 in the morning. A storm was raging outside. The rain was coming down hard. The wind was cutting through the February darkness, and every single person in her house was asleep. And sometime in those hours when the whole world was supposed to be still, Asha Degree got out of bed, packed her book bag, and walked out the front door into the night. Alone. Into the storm. On Valentine's Day. And nobody, not her parents sleeping down the hall, not her brother in the bed next to hers, not a single soul in the neighborhood, heard her go. She was 9 years old. She was shy. She was scared of dogs. She never opened the front door without asking her parents first. And yet she walked into a rainstorm in the middle of the night and vanished so completely that 26 years later the world is still searching for her. This is the story of Asha Degree, and I need you to stay with me for every single second of it. Because what investigators uncovered in 2024 and 2025 did not just crack this case open. It shattered everything people thought they knew about why that little girl left her bed that night. And it pointed directly at a family who has been living in the same county as the Degrees for all 26 of those years. Before we go any further, drop in the comments right now and tell me where in the world you are watching this from. I want to know. I read every single one. And if you are new to this channel and you care about cases like this one, cases where a child deserves justice and the world cannot afford to forget, subscribe right now. This channel exists for exactly this. For Asha. For every child who needed the world to pay attention and didn't get enough of it. Hit subscribe and stay with me. Let's go back to the beginning. Because to understand what happened the night Asha disappeared, you have to understand who she was and what kind of family she came from. Shelby, North Carolina is the kind of place where people know each other. Small enough that faces become familiar, tight enough that a family's business becomes the neighborhood's business, close enough that when something goes wrong, the whole community feels it. Cleveland County, where Shelby sits, is not a place where children vanish. It is not a place where parents lock their doors in fear. It is the kind of American town that exists in the quiet middle of the country, where kids ride bikes and families go to church on Sundays, and the biggest drama on a Monday morning is a lost homework assignment or a slow traffic light on the way to school. Asha Degree grew up here. She belonged here. She was, by every account from everyone who loved her, exactly the kind of child this town produces, careful, kind, obedient, and deeply rooted in the security of her family. Harold and Aquila Degree were devoted parents. They raised their 2 children with structure and love and a clear set of expectations. Asha and her older brother O'Brien shared a bedroom. They were close in the way that siblings with small age gaps often are. Constant companions, shared secrets, the easy shorthand of 2 people who have grown up in the same small space together. Asha was in 4th grade at Falston Elementary School. She loved basketball. She wore her hair in pigtails. She had a smile that her family described as pure sunshine, the kind of smile that a room notices when it walks in. Her teachers loved her. Her classmates loved her. Her parents called her their heart. And the community of Shelby, who would go on to search for her for years and years after she was gone, called her something that has stayed with this case through 2.5 decades. They called her Shelby's sweetheart. There was not a computer in the Degree house. There was no internet access, no social media, none of the digital infrastructure that we now associate with the dangers that find children. Asha had no reason to be communicating with strangers. She had no secret life that anyone who knew her could detect. She was a 9-year-old who loved basketball and her brother and her family and her church. And she lived within the boundaries her parents set with the kind of trust that made Harold and Aquila believe they knew exactly what their daughter was doing and who she was with at all times. Her mother, Aquila, said it plainly years later. She said Asha was scared to death of dogs. She said she never thought Asha would go out of the house on her own under any circumstances. That was not who Asha was. That was not the child they had raised. Which makes what happened on the night of February 13th into the 14th of the year 2000 so profoundly disturbing. Because something happened. Something made that cautious, obedient, housebound little girl get out of bed in the middle of a storm and leave. And 26 years later, that question, why did she go, is still the beating heart of this case. The weekend before she disappeared had been ordinary in the way that weekends are when you are 9 years old. On the 11th of February, a Friday, Cleveland County schools were closed. Asha and O'Brien spent the day at their aunt's house and went to youth basketball practice. On Saturday, Asha's team played a game. They lost. It was the first loss of the season. Asha had fouled out. She was upset, tearful with her teammates in the way that competitive children are when they care about something and it doesn't go the way they want it. But her parents said she seemed to work through it. By the time the family was home and the day was over, she appeared to have settled back into herself. On Sunday the 13th, the family went to church, as they always did, and came home. Around 8 in the evening, both children went to bed. This is where the night begins to feel strange in retrospect. Strange in the way that ordinary hours feel strange when you know what comes after them. Around 9 o'clock, the power went out in the neighborhood. A car accident nearby had taken out the lines. The house went dark. Harold and Aquila managed the interruption the way parents do. They checked on their kids. They handled the darkness. They waited. The power came back on at approximately 12:30 in the morning. Harold checked on both children. Asha was in her bed. O'Brien was in his. Everything looked exactly as it should. Harold went back to his own room. Somewhere in the hours that followed, according to O'Brien, he heard Asha's bed squeak. He did not get up. He did not think anything of it. It was the middle of the night, and his little sister shifted in her sleep. That is a completely ordinary thing. He went back to sleep. Harold checked on the children one final time shortly before 2:30 in the morning. Both were in their beds. Both appeared to be sleeping. He went back to his room. He closed his eyes. When Aquila went to wake the children for school at 6:30 in the morning on February 14th, Valentine's Day, Asha was gone. Her bed was empty. Her book bag was gone. The outfit she had laid out for school was missing. Her purse was gone. She had packed deliberately. She had taken specific things. This was not a child who had stumbled outside half asleep and gotten disoriented. She had made a decision. She had gathered what she needed. And she had walked out the front door of her home in the middle of a cold, wet, windy February night and disappeared into the darkness of Highway 18. The call to police came immediately. The search began within hours. Shelby mobilized. Cleveland County mobilized. Hundreds of volunteers showed up to walk fields and search tree lines and drive roads. The love for this family, for this child, was immediate and overwhelming and real. And from the very beginning, investigators hit something they could not explain. There was no forced entry into the Degree home. There was no evidence that anyone had come in and taken Asha. She had left on her own. The question was not whether she had left willingly. The question was why, and where she was going, and whether she had been alone when she got there. 2 witnesses came forward. 2 separate people who had been driving along Highway 18 in the early morning hours of February 14th reported seeing a young girl walking along the road. One of them, a motorist driving the route in the dark and the rain, saw the girl and was alarmed enough to turn around and check on her. When they turned back, the girl saw the car and ran into the woods along the roadside. She disappeared into the tree line and was not seen again. The sighting placed her approximately 1.3 miles from her home, walking in the direction of Highway 18 and the businesses and roads that led away from the neighborhood. She was alone when she was seen. She was walking with purpose. She did not appear injured. She appeared to be running away from help. Why would a 9-year-old run from someone who was trying to help her? That question sat at the center of this case for years, because it suggested one of 2 things. Either Asha was afraid of being caught, which meant she was running towards something she chose, something she did not want a stranger to stop her from reaching, or she had been instructed to avoid contact, told not to talk to anyone, told to keep walking no matter what, by someone who knew she was coming. Investigators leaned heavily on that second possibility, because Asha Degree did not have a history of rebellion. She did not have a history of secrets. She did not have a single credible motive that her family, her teachers, or her friends could identify for why she would leave home voluntarily in the middle of the night in a rainstorm. Something drew her out, and whatever it was compelling enough to override every instinct that had kept this cautious little girl safely inside her house for 9 years. The days after her disappearance were agony for Harold and Aquila. The searches continued. Tips came in. Investigators followed every thread. Law enforcement from across the state mobilized. The FBI was called in. The National Center for Missing and Exploited Children got involved. Asha's face went on milk cartons. Her name went on billboards. Highway 18 got searched and researched. The woods along the route were combed again and again. And nothing. No body. No clothing. No trail. No sign of where Asha Degree had gone after she ran into those trees and disappeared from the sight of the last person who ever reported seeing her alive. The case went cold. The years passed. 2000 became 2001, then 2, then 5, then 10. Harold and Aquila never stopped. They kept Asha's name alive the way only parents can, with the specific and exhausting love of people who refuse to accept that their child is simply gone. In 2008, they established a scholarship in her name for a deserving local student. They organized an annual walk that began at their front door and ended at the missing persons billboard for Asha along Highway 18, the same stretch of road she had walked on the last night anyone saw her. Every year, the community came out. Every year, Shelby showed up for Asha, because this was their child too. I need you to subscribe right now if you haven't already. This story is not over. What is coming is the part that will make you understand why this case has exploded back into the national conversation, and why the Degree family may finally, after 26 years, be closer to answers than they have ever been. Subscribe so you don't miss a single update on this case as it develops. And drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. I'm reading every one. Now let's talk about August of 2001. Because 16 months after Asha disappeared, a construction crew was doing routine excavation work on an access road for a new home in neighboring Burke County, approximately 25 miles north of Shelby. And they found something that would become the only physical evidence in this case for the next 23 years. They found Asha's book bag, wrapped in 2 plastic trash bags, buried, hidden deliberately. The bag still had Asha's name and phone number written on it, the way parents label their children's belongings so they come home if they get lost on a school bus or left on a playground. Inside the bag were items that belonged to Asha, and inside that bag were also 2 items that did not belong to her, objects that investigators could not immediately identify as having any connection to the Degree family. 2 items that someone had placed in that bag alongside Asha's belongings before wrapping it in plastic and burying it in the ground 25 miles from where she vanished. Think about that for a moment. Someone buried this child's book bag. They wrapped it in trash bags, the kind of thing you do when you are trying to preserve something or hide it, or both. They drove it 25 miles from the scene of her disappearance and put it in the ground. That is not the act of a random stranger. That is not the act of someone who stumbled into something and panicked. That is deliberate. That is calculated. That is someone who knew enough and had enough time and enough composure to stage the concealment of evidence. Which means whoever took Asha Degree was not acting in a spontaneous moment of violence. They were thinking. They were planning. They knew what they were doing. Investigators at the time photographed those 2 unidentified items from the bag and held them close. They would sit in an evidence locker for more than 2 decades. And when forensic science finally caught up to what was in that bag, the results would point directly at a family living right there in Cleveland County. People who had been within reach of investigators the entire time. Let's talk about what changed. Because for most of the first 2 decades of this case, the investigative leads were painfully limited. In 2016, investigators publicly released an image of a dark green vehicle they believed may have been involved in Asha's disappearance. They said the car had been identified through painstaking work between the sheriff's office and the FBI. A vehicle they believed Asha may have gotten into after she left the roadside and disappeared from sight. A dark green car. An older model. Something that would have been unremarkable on a rural North Carolina road in the year 2000. Nobody came forward with anything definitive. The car remained a lead without a resolution. And then came the advances in forensic DNA genealogy. The same science that cracked the Golden State Killer case. The same technology that identified Princess Doe in New Jersey after 40 years. This technology changed everything about cold cases, and it changed everything about Asha Degree. In 2024, investigators finally got the break they had been waiting for. DNA analysis of the items recovered from Asha's book bag, those 2 foreign objects that did not belong to her, the items that had sat in evidence for over 2 decades, returned a match. And the match pointed to a woman named Annalie Dedman Ramirez. A hair stem recovered from Asha's undershirt, the shirt she had been wearing the night she disappeared, also appeared to match Annalie Dedman Ramirez's DNA profile. Annalie Dedman Ramirez, a member of a family who lived in Cleveland County, a family with deep roots in Shelby, a family with a patriarch named Roy Dedman who, and pay close attention here, had 29 vehicles registered in his name, 3 of which were green, one of which was an older model green car consistent with what witnesses described on Highway 18 the night Asha vanished. The Dedman family suddenly became the center of this investigation. Let me give you the full picture of what investigators were looking at when those DNA results came back. Annalie Dedman Ramirez had 2 sisters. At the time of Asha's disappearance in February of 2000, those sisters were 15 and 16 years old. Teenagers. Old enough to drive. Old enough to make plans. Old enough to be out at 2:30 in the morning without their parents necessarily knowing. Their father, Roy Dedman, was in the business of operating assisted living facilities, rest homes that housed vulnerable adult residents who depended on him for care. Their mother, Connie Dedman, was connected to that business. And living in one of those facilities, the Northbrook Rest Home, between 2002 and 2004 was a man named Russell Underhill. Underhill had listed Roy Dedman as his emergency contact in his medical records. Underhill died in 2004. But during the window when he lived at that facility, he had been in close proximity to Roy Dedman and whatever secrets that family held. Search warrants were executed in the fall of 2024. Law enforcement descended on multiple properties associated with the Dedman family, a home and property in Shelby, an assisted living facility in Vail, and a home in Charlotte. Investigators seized vehicles. They seized phones. They collected forensic samples. They searched buildings and grounds with the kind of thoroughness that only comes when investigators believe they are close. When the DNA has already told them something that changes everything, and now they need the physical evidence to confirm what they know. And sitting in a lab somewhere, as investigators sorted through what those searches produced, were answers that this family and this community and this country had been waiting 24 years to hear. But here is what cracked this case open in a way that no lab result ever could. Here is the detail that makes this case feel, in the deepest and most human sense, like the truth trying to force its way out of people who had spent 2 decades sitting on top of it. Sometime in the mid-2000s, the years after Asha disappeared, the years when her face was still on billboards and her name was still in the papers, and the community of Shelby was still walking that stretch of Highway 18 in her memory, a man found himself at a house party. He was in his 20s. He was running in a social circle that sometimes overlapped with the Dedman daughters. And at this party, he witnessed something he never forgot. One of the daughters, one of the teenage girls who had been 15 or 16 years old the night Asha walked out of her house, was at this party, and she was deeply intoxicated, and she was sobbing. Not just crying. Sobbing. The kind of crying that comes from somewhere deep. The kind of crying that has a specific and terrible cause. And in that state, in those moments of broken intoxication, she said words that this man never forgot. She said, "I killed Asha Degree." He heard it clearly. He was close enough. He was sober enough to understand what he was hearing. And he saw what happened next. Because the moment those words left her mouth, her sister, the other Dedman girl at the party, came across the room. She grabbed her. She became stern and angry in a way that cut through the noise of everything around them. And she told her to shut up. The sobbing girl stopped talking. The secret went back underground. And it stayed there for years, until investigators, armed with DNA evidence and search warrants and the relentless work of 2.5 decades of investigation, finally tracked down this witness and sat across from him and asked him what he knew. He told them everything. He said he was 100% certain about what he heard. He said he had no doubt. And then investigators asked him to take a polygraph examination. He agreed. He sat down. He answered the questions. He passed. Let that sit with you for a moment. A witness. A polygraph. A confession made in a moment of drunken grief at a house party. 3 forensic DNA connections. 29 vehicles registered to the family patriarch. At least 3 of them green. A dark green car seen near the last known location of Asha Degree in the hours before dawn on February 14, 2000. And then came the text messages. In September of 2024, when investigators executed those search warrants and the Asha Degree case exploded back into the headlines for the first time in years, something happened inside the Dedman family. Fear. Because people who have been sitting on a secret for 24 years and suddenly see law enforcement at the door do not stay silent. They reach for their phones. And those phones, seized by investigators under warrant, contained a conversation between two of the Deadman sisters. A conversation that read like people deciding, in real time, how much to say and what to hide, and whether the walls they had built around this secret for 2 decades were still standing. One message, sent from one sister to the other after the news coverage of the case broke back into public consciousness, said this: "Dad is probably going to be a huge suspect." Another message, from the other sister back to her, said, "I just talked to the family attorney. The theory is I did it. Accident. Covered it up." Another message said, "I want to do what Dad says." And from the first sister to the second, "Maybe we should have let you do what you originally wanted to do." Read those messages again. Slowly. "The theory is I did it. Accident. Covered it up. I want to do what Dad says. Maybe we should have let you do what you originally wanted to do." What did she originally want to do? What was the option that was taken off the table? Come forward? Confess? Go to the police herself? Turn herself in before investigators got there? We do not know. But we know these women were texting each other with the kind of language that belongs to people who are not innocent bystanders being caught up in someone else's investigation. They were texting like people who know exactly what happened to Asha Degree. One of them also texted, "They think it's our shirt, but it's not. Her mom said it wasn't hers. I don't remember that shirt. I'm scared though." She was scared, and she had every reason to be. Because in September of 2024, for the first time in 2.5 decades, Asha Degree's case was officially and publicly reclassified, not as a missing persons investigation, as a homicide. Law enforcement confirmed, for the first time formally, what the DNA and the buried book bag and the drunken confession and the text messages all pointed toward: that Asha Degree did not simply disappear, that she had been killed, that her body had been concealed, that someone had done this deliberately and had lived in Cleveland County ever since, driving the same roads as Harold and Aquila, breathing the same air as the family that spent 26 years putting one foot in front of the other and refusing to give up on their daughter. I want you to pause right here. If this case is affecting you the way it is affecting me, hit that like button right now. One tap for Asha. One tap for Harold and Aquila and O'Brien, who never stopped. And if you haven't subscribed yet, do it right now, because this case is still developing, and I will be covering every update the moment it happens. This is the kind of case where the ending has not been written yet, where the justice has not been delivered yet, and you need to be here when it is. Now let's talk about Roy Deadman. Because the text messages and the DNA and the confession at the party do not exist in isolation. They exist within a web of circumstance that wraps around this patriarch and his family in ways that are impossible to explain as coincidence. Roy Deadman operated assisted living facilities in Cleveland County. He had 29 vehicles registered in his name at various points. When investigators searched his Shelby property in 2024, they found 3 green vehicles and 1 red truck. They seized at least one of the older green vehicles for forensic examination. This is a man who had resources, who had properties, who had the kind of operational capacity that allowed things to be moved, hidden, and buried, who was listed as the emergency contact for a man, Russell Underhill, who had lived in his facility and died in 2004, taking whatever he knew with him. When investigators approached the Deadman daughters about the DNA evidence, they wanted them to submit to polygraph examinations. One of them refused. When she finally took one, the results indicated deception. One of them told investigators directly, "If my dad did it, he did it, but I had nothing to do with it." That statement, "if my dad did it," is not the statement of someone who has no knowledge of what happened. That is the statement of someone who has been turning a possibility over in their mind for 26 years. Someone who knows enough to assign the probability to their father. Someone who chose that framing carefully. "If my dad did it." Not "I have no idea what you're talking about." Not "our family had nothing to do with this." "If my dad did it." As of February of 2026, no arrests have been made. No charges have been filed. The Deadman family has denied any involvement in Asha's disappearance. Their attorney has spoken on their behalf. The legal process has not yet delivered what the DNA and the text messages and the witness testimony and the polygraph results have all been pointing toward. The investigation is ongoing. The forensic work continues. The reward, $100,000, including $25,000 contributed by the Office of the Governor of North Carolina, remains active for information leading to an arrest and conviction. But let's be completely clear about what investigators now believe. They believe Asha Degree was murdered. They believe her body was concealed, which means someone knows where she is. They believe that members of the Dedman family, including daughters who were teenagers at the time, were involved in her death. They believe that the patriarch of that family, Roy Dedman, was involved in the concealment, if not the act itself. They believe that a cover-up was constructed the night Asha disappeared and maintained, with extraordinary discipline and at extraordinary cost to everyone involved, for 24 years. Until the DNA finally said what no one in that family was willing to say out loud. Until the science reached back through time and touched the truth that had been buried with that book bag in Burke County and brought it back into the light. And they believe, and this is the detail that breaks something open in your chest if you let yourself really feel it, they believe that somewhere, in the ground in North Carolina, Asha Degree's body is waiting to be found. Because she is a victim of homicide. Because her body was concealed. Because someone has known where she is this entire time while Harold and Aquila walked that road every year and put one foot in front of the other and kept her name on a billboard and gave a scholarship in her memory and refused, with everything in them, to let the world forget their daughter. Let me tell you something about Harold and Aquila Degree. Because this family is the moral center of this case, and always has been. In all the years of waiting, in all the years of no answers, no arrests, no justice, just the annual walk and the scholarship and the quiet, devastating work of keeping a missing child's memory alive, they never stopped being exactly who they were. Parents, people of faith, members of a community that loved them back. Aquila said, even years after Asha's disappearance, that she still believed her daughter was alive. She said she was not crazy enough to think a 9-year-old could disappear into thin air without somebody knowing something. She was right. Somebody did know something. Multiple somebodies. And they chose silence over justice for 2.5 decades. They drove past that billboard. They lived in that county. They watched that family grieve. And they said nothing. The reclassification of the case as a homicide in 2024 was both a breakthrough and a devastation. A breakthrough because it meant investigators had something. Real evidence, real DNA, real direction. A devastation because it confirmed what the Degree family had probably been carrying in the back of their minds for years, in the private, dark hours, in the moments when faith strains against the weight of reality. That their little girl was not coming home. That she had not been somewhere all this time, alive and grown and unreachable. That the worst had happened on the night she walked out the door. That Valentine's Day in the year 2000 was the last night of Asha's life. She was 9 years old. She loved basketball. She wore pigtails. Her favorite color was probably not even fully established yet. She was 9. She shared a bedroom with her big brother. She was scared of dogs. She never opened the front door without asking. And on the last night of her life, something drew her out into a rainstorm and put her on a highway in the dark, and the world did not protect her. The question this case has always asked, why did she leave, may have an answer now. Not a confirmed answer. Not a courtroom-proven answer. But an answer that is taking shape in the evidence. She may have been lured. She may have been contacted by someone she knew, or someone posing as someone she trusted, and told something that made her believe she had to go, had to leave in the middle of the night, had to keep it secret, had to avoid anyone who tried to stop her. That would explain everything. The packed book bag, the deliberate departure, the outfit she took, the fact that she ran from the driver who tried to check on her. She had been told not to let anyone stop her from getting to where she was going. And where she was going was toward whoever had reached out to her. Toward a dark green car. Toward the Dedman family. Toward the end of her story. And investigators are still piecing together the precise sequence of what happened. She may have been observed on the road by someone who was not expecting to find her there. Someone who recognized her. Someone who knew that a 9-year-old girl walking alone on a highway at 4 in the morning represented a problem that could not be left unresolved. And what they did to resolve it is the reason this case is now a homicide investigation. The reason those search warrants were executed. The reason those text messages exist. The reason a woman sobbed at a party in the mid-2000s and said words that a polygraph-passing witness has never been able to unhear. 26 years. That is how long this has gone on. 26 years since Harold checked on his children at 2:30 in the morning and saw his daughter in her bed. 26 years since Aquila went to wake the kids for school and found an empty space where Asha should have been. 26 years of walks along Highway 18. 26 years of a scholarship. 26 years of a billboard. 26 years of a family refusing to let the world look away. And now, finally, achingly, with a weight that is almost too much to carry, the science and the evidence and the testimony and the text messages are all pointing in the same direction. At the same family. In the same county. Close enough that justice has always been within reach, if anyone had been willing to reach for it sooner. The reward is $100,000. If you know anything, if you have ever heard anything about this case, if you know anything about the Dedmon family, or about what happened on Highway 18 in the early morning hours of February 14, 2000, you contact the Cleveland County Sheriff's Office or the FBI. You make that call. Because Asha Degree deserves to be found. Her parents deserve to bury their daughter. Her brother deserves to grieve and heal. And whoever did this deserves to sit in a courtroom and face what they have spent 26 years running from. Asha Degree, 9 years old, 4th grade at Falston Elementary, Shelby, North Carolina. Valentine's Day, 2000. She wore pigtails. She loved basketball. She was scared of dogs. She was Shelby's sweetheart. She is not forgotten. She will never be forgotten. Not by her family. Not by her community. Not by this channel. And not by you, because you are here, and you stayed, and you know her name now. Say it. Asha Degree. Remember it. Share this video so that someone else knows it too. Because the best chance this case has is the same chance it has always had. Enough people refusing to let it disappear. If this video reached you and you feel that weight, share it. Post it. Send it to someone who needs to hear this story. One share could be the share that reaches the person who finally gives investigators what they need to close this. One comment could start a conversation that leads somewhere. You are not just watching a video. You are part of a chain of attention that keeps a murdered child's name alive until the people responsible for her death face justice. Subscribe to this channel. Hit the notification bell. Because this case is not over. It is moving. It is developing. And when the next update breaks, you need to be here. Drop your location in the comments. Tell me where in the world you are watching from. Tell me what you think happened. Tell me if you have heard of this case before, or if this is the first time Asha's story has reached you. I want to hear from you. This community is how we keep these cases alive. For Asha, for Harold and Aquila, for O'Brien, for every child who walked into the dark and never came home. We keep going. We keep watching. We keep saying their names. Until there is closure. Until there is justice. Until there is nothing left to fight for, because the fight has finally been won. I will see you in the next one.